Imagine for a moment that someone tries to walk all over you, impose their will, manipulate you with guilt, or make you feel small. What do? Many times we stay silent, justify what we didn't need to justify, or give in out of fear of losing affection, companionship, or acceptance. And worst of all, we end up feeling used, disrespected, and with our self-esteem shattered. This is one of the most common wounds I see in so many people's lives. Believing that strength means enduring in silence, when in reality, true strength lies in setting firm boundaries rooted in self-respect. I'm Gabriel, and I've been studying and practicing Stoicism as a philosophy of life for over 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of people around the world, and everywhere I've found the same source of pain. When you don't know how to set boundaries, the world gets used to stepping on you. But when you learn to stand your ground with calm and dignity, no one can break your spirit. Because being strong doesn't mean hardening yourself. It means knowing yourself, respecting yourself, and standing firm in what truly matters. Today, I want to walk with you through 14 deeply practical lessons in Stoicism, self-love, and psychology. Together, they will bring you clarity to cut off those toxic dynamics that hurt you so much, and above all, help you build a life where no one dares to manipulate you or use your kindness against you. We won't talk about empty formulas or cliches, but about a real way of living with strength, respect, and serenity. Let's begin. Number 1. Stop justifying yourself. There's something I've seen over and over again: brilliant, wise people with lives full of experiences who, whenever someone questions what they do, respond with an endless chain of justifications. I couldn't because... Sorry. What happened was, I hope you understand that. And the funny thing is, many times no one is even asking them for explanations, but still they feel compelled to give them. Has that ever happened to you? That habit, which seems harmless, opens the door for others to think they have the right to evaluate you, judge you, or direct your life. When you justify yourself too much, you send the message that you need permission to exist. Stoicism reminds us of something simple but powerful. The only things under your control are your actions and your words. What others think of you, what they imagine, what they make up, that is not in your control. So why waste energy explaining and defending what you're not even obligated to explain? Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, said that the best way to defend your dignity is to live in such a way that your life itself is the argument. I read that line many years ago, on a day when I was apologizing for not living up to someone else's expectations. That day, it hit me like a bucket of cold water. I realized I was acting as if others were the judges and I was the accused. This isn't about becoming harsh or unfriendly, but about keeping things simple. If you say I'm not going, that's enough. If you say I can't help you with that, that's enough. You don't need to decorate your words with endless explanations that will only give the other person more material to negotiate or challenge your decision. The one who respects you will do so with a single clear sentence. The one who doesn't won't be convinced even if you wrote them a full essay. I remember, for example, one afternoon when a friend asked me to help him move. I had work to finish and simply couldn't, but instead of just saying no, I started circling around, that I was busy, that it had been a tough day, that maybe tomorrow. And you know what happened? He insisted even more. It wasn't until I took a breath, stood firm and said, I can't, without any extras, that it all ended. I realized how simple it was. Here's a practical exercise you can start today. For 1 week, every time you say no, try not to give an explanation. Just a short phrase, with a calm voice and firm tone. The first time you'll feel awkward, almost like you were being impolite. But what's interesting is that, little by little, that discomfort disappears, and what's left is a huge sense of freedom. Humor also helps on this path. Once, a friend complained because I didn't show up to an event and said, "At least tell me why you didn't come." And me, already trained, replied playfully, "Because I don't have telepathy and didn't know my presence was mandatory." We both laughed, and in the end, the tension broke. You don't always have to be serious to defend your boundaries. Sometimes irony is a gentler, yet equally effective shield. I want you to ask yourself, how many times in your life have you given an unnecessary explanation just to feel accepted? How much time and energy would you have saved if you had simply said no and left it at that? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, that's a good sign. It means you're noticing a pattern you can change. Stopping the habit of justifying yourself isn't selfish. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's the simplest way to make it clear that you're not at everyone's disposal, that your word carries its own weight. Because when you don't need to explain yourself, no one dares to question your dignity. Number 2, the access rule. Not everyone gets in. Think of your life as a house. There's a front door, a couple of windows, maybe a garden. Now, imagine anyone could walk in and out of that house without permission, rummaging through your drawers, moving your things, even criticizing the decor. Pretty unbearable, right? Well, something similar happens when we let anyone have unlimited access to our time, our energy, and even our thoughts. The mistake is believing that, because we're good people, we have to keep the door always open. The truth is, just like a house needs locks, your life needs filters. One of the things that struck me most when reading Epictetus was when he spoke of self-discipline as a form of freedom. At first, it sounded contradictory. How can limiting myself make me freer? But then I understood. It's about consciously choosing who gets to enter your life and who doesn't. Not everyone deserves access to your intimacy, your projects, your emotions, and that doesn't make you selfish. It makes you wise. Here's a powerful visual exercise. Close your eyes and imagine your life as that house. Ask yourself, who has a key? Meaning, who can call you anytime and you'll answer without hesitation? Who rings the bell and you gladly let in? And most importantly, who sneaks in through the window without an invitation, draining your energy, and you've allowed it out of habit or fear? This exercise can feel uncomfortable, but it's eye-opening. I experienced it firsthand a few years ago when I realized I was answering every message, every call, as if it were a sacred duty. My phone was never on silent because deep down, I felt guilty about not being available. Until one day I caught myself interrupting a peaceful meal just to hear the same old complaints from a toxic family member. And it hurts to say it, but it was my own brother. That day I told myself, enough. Not everyone gets a key to my life. It was like installing an invisible lock that gave me back my peace. Stoicism invites us to protect what is under our control, and your inner circle is one of those things. You can't decide what others say, but you can decide who you listen to, who you share your secrets with, who you give your time to. Not everyone who smiles deserves trust. Not everyone who insists deserves space. The access rule is simple. Some get in, some stay in the garden, and a few should never cross the door. A very helpful tool is making a 3-column list. In the first, the people who add calm, joy, and respect. In the second, the neutral ones. In the third, the ones who drain you. Then ask yourself, what level of access does each one have in your life? You'll be surprised to find that, often, the third column takes up more time than it should. That's where you need to adjust keys, bells, and windows. This doesn't mean cutting ties cruelly. Sometimes it's enough to change how often you interact, to set softer boundaries, to decide certain conversations won't happen anymore. And yes, someone may get upset. But remember, your peace is worth more than the temporary approval of someone who doesn't respect it. I want you to hold this image clearly in your mind. Every time someone demands access they don't deserve, imagine they're knocking at your door. You are the gatekeeper. You decide whether to open, to answer from the window, or simply not to respond. Because when your life has clear locks, no one dares to come in without permission. Number 3, stay calm before you respond. Has it ever happened to you that someone says something and you feel an immediate pressure to answer on the spot? As if the world would fall apart if you didn't give an instant response. That rush is fertile ground for manipulation, because when you reply without thinking, you usually end up saying what you didn't mean, agreeing to what doesn't suit you, or committing to something you later regret. Calm, on the other hand, is like an invisible shield. When you breathe and take a few seconds before opening your mouth, you disarm the other person and reclaim yourself. Stoicism emphasizes the importance of pausing. Seneca said, "Anger, if not restrained, often rushes ahead of reason." And that idea applies not only to anger, but to any emotion or external pressure. Calm is like a compass that resets your north before you move forward. I learned this in a work meeting where someone tried to put me on the spot with a difficult question. My first reaction was to answer quickly, defensively, and with some irritation. But I remembered my personal rule: 3 breaths before responding. Those few seconds were enough to shift my tone from an impulsive attack to a serene and firm reply. And believe me, the effect was radical. The other person lost the advantage. Here's a small practical protocol I want to share with you, almost like a ritual. Pause, ask, respond. First, pause. Take a deep breath, even if it means 3 seconds of awkward silence. Second, ask, "Can you repeat what you said?" Or, "Can I think about it for a moment?" This gives you space and shows you won't be rushed. And third, respond. Once your head is clearer, you answer from your center, not from someone else's pressure. Try this right now. Breathe in a square. Inhale for a count of 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold again for 4. Do this 3 times in a row. Do you feel how your body shifts? How the tension drops? If you practice often, it becomes automatic. Every time someone pushes you for a quick answer, your body will know what to do. I remember one day someone sent me a long message full of reproaches. My impulse was to reply immediately, to justify myself, to defend myself. But this time I did something different. I set the phone aside and gave myself an hour before responding. When I came back, my tone was completely different. Calm, brief, and guilt-free. And the curious thing is, when you don't feed the fire of urgency, many times the other person runs out of weapons. Let me pause here to ask something important. If these words are helping you, subscribe to the channel, leave me a like, and tell me in the comments what country you're listening from. It's the most beautiful way to see how this community grows and to know you're not alone on this path. I'm deeply grateful that you're here in this garden where Stoic wisdom blooms. Calm is power. The one who yells and rushes is not the strongest, but the most lost. The one who breathes and responds when they decide, that's the one no one can manipulate. Practicing calm before responding not only protects your dignity, it also teaches others that your time and your words carry a weight that isn't up for negotiation. Number 4, say no without explanations. Saying no seems easy, it's just 2 letters. But how often does it get stuck in our throats? And when it finally comes out, it almost always arrives with an entire novel. No, because I'm busy, and I also have to help someone, and today I've got a headache, but maybe another day. And in that sea of excuses, we end up giving away the strength we had. Every justification opens a crack where others slip in to insist, manipulate, or negotiate. A no explained is really a disguised maybe. Stoicism teaches that virtue lies in clarity, and there's nothing clearer than a firm, calm no. Epictetus spoke about how true freedom is being able to say yes or no based on what's within your control without fear of what others might think. I've seen it many times. When you reply with a short no, the other person may be surprised at first, even uncomfortable, but afterward, they have no room to argue. On the other hand, when you embellish, it's like leaving a door cracked open that never shuts. Here's a simple example. Someone asks to borrow money. You know you don't want to, you can't, or it's just not healthy. The weak version says, "No, you see, I'm short on cash. I have expenses. Right now I can't, but maybe later." What does the other person do? They start convincing you, "But lend me just a little, or tell me how much you can, or I'll pay you back in a month." And there you are, trapped. The strong version is, "I don't lend money, period." And if they insist, just repeat it like an echo. That clarity, though it stings, cuts things off at the root, because otherwise people get used to you always being available, always ready to help. But you, who helps you when you need it? I practiced this once with a friend who constantly asked me for urgent favors. It was hard. I felt the need to justify myself. I can't because I'm too busy, because I'm tired. Until one day, exhausted, I replied calmly, "No, not this time." And that was it. My voice trembled. Yes, but I did it. The result? He got a little upset, but soon stopped asking me for things that weren't his to ask. My self-respect grew more than any excuse I could have made up. And yes, that friend eventually filtered himself out. We lost touch. Today, I know I wasn't the one who lost. I gained peace and calm. I invite you to practice something very concrete, the short phrase, I can't. I don't want to. I'm not going. Say the phrase and stay silent. That silence feels uncomfortable, I know, but it's your best ally. The other person will fill it with whatever they want, but you don't have to. Train that pause until it becomes natural. Imagine that every time you say no without adornments, you're planting a tree in your inner garden. At first it feels odd, even barren, but with time those trees form a forest of respect, and people learn to walk your paths without stepping where they shouldn't. Saying no without explanations isn't rude, it's a declaration of sovereignty. It's reminding the world that your life is not up for debate. Because when your no is short and firm, no one dares to treat you as negotiable. Number 5, spot manipulation early. The most dangerous thing about manipulation isn't when you're already caught in it, but when you don't even realize it has begun. It often starts disguised as affection, flattery, or concern. I only want what's best for you. If you really love me, you'd do it. No one else understands you like I do. Sounds nice, right? But beneath it, there's a hidden sting, urgency, confusion, guilt. And by the time you notice, you're already wrapped up in it. The key is training your eyes and ears to catch those signals from the very first moment. Stoicism teaches us to observe calmly before reacting. Marcus Aurelius spoke about the importance of seeing things as they are, without masks or decorations. And that applies to people too. Look at what they do, not what they promise. Focus on their actions, not their sweet words. If someone constantly leaves you feeling guilty, drained, or confused, that person isn't adding to your life. They're draining it. There are manipulation tactics so common they might as well be part of an unwritten manual. One is guilt reversal. You point out a problem and suddenly you're the one apologizing. Another is urgency. Decide now or you'll lose it. There's also the compliment with a sting. You're so smart, but sometimes you just don't think straight. And of course, isolation, making you feel like only that person is truly on your side. Sound familiar? I remember a conversation with a woman who told me how her partner, after cheating on her, managed to convince her it was her fault for neglecting him. She believed it for years, until one day, exhausted, she started reading about toxic dynamics and realized she had been carrying guilt that wasn't hers. It was like taking off a backpack full of stones. That revelation gave her life back. Here's a simple exercise. The next time someone makes you feel rushed, stopped, or guilty, ask yourself, is this feeling really mine, or is it being pushed onto me? If you notice the weight is coming from outside, stop. That's the alarm. You don't need to argue or fight, just recognize, this isn't mine. With that one step, you've already cut half the manipulation. It also helps to imagine a power map. Ask yourself, who benefits from my guilt? Who benefits from my exhaustion? If the answer is always the same person, there's your proof. Manipulation feeds on your energy. When you withdraw, it dies out on its own, like a fire with no oxygen. Remember, manipulation doesn't always shout. Most of the time, it whispers, and the secret is to catch it early. Because when you learn to detect those little poisons from the very first drop, no one can ever poison your dignity entirely. Number 6. Your personal constitution in writing. Sometimes we think strength is a matter of character or a burst of courage, but the truth is, firmness is built on clarity beforehand. If you don't know what is non-negotiable for you, when outside pressure comes, you'll end up doubting. That's why I like to talk about a kind of personal constitution, an intimate document written by you that sets down your principles, your standards, and your red lines. Just as a country has its constitution so it doesn't depend on the whims of the day, you need yours so you don't depend on emotions or other people's manipulation. I remember years ago, while reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, I came across a phrase I immediately wrote down in my notebook. The soul becomes, dyed with the color of your thoughts. Therefore, watch carefully what you allow yourself to think. That day I realized it wasn't enough to simply want to live with dignity. I needed to have written down the color I wanted to give my life. I opened a notebook and began drafting my principles. I don't justify my decisions. I don't lend what I'm not willing to lose. My rest is non-negotiable. Respect is the minimum condition in any relationship. Each line was like a brick in an invisible wall that protected me. Writing it down has a different power than just thinking it. Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's 5 great emperors, knew this well. His Meditations was not a book written for sale, but his personal journal where he recorded his most powerful thoughts and conclusions. When something is on paper, you can reread it in moments of doubt, revisit it as a contract with yourself. And on those days when emotion clouds everything, that page becomes your compass. For example, if your constitution says, "I don't allow shouting in a conversation," then when someone raises their voice, you don't need to improvise. You already know your action. End it right there. Today, almost no one values writing things on paper, since a WhatsApp note would seem enough. That's not wrong, but for me, nothing compares to pen on paper. Your brain processes differently what you handwrite. It feels like a ritual, with an extraordinary effect on your psyche. To reinforce this commitment, you can choose a symbolic object. For a long time, I used a simple bracelet. Every time I doubted, I looked at it and remembered my written principles. It was like carrying that constitution on my skin. You can choose whatever you like: a stone, a ring, a folded piece of paper in your wallet. What matters is that it reminds you your dignity is signed and sealed. Your constitution doesn't need to be long or complicated. Sometimes 5 or 6 phrases are enough to shield your life. The essential thing is that it's clear and yours. Not copied from someone else, not a borrowed set of rules, but words you truly feel belong to you. And every so often, I recommend revisiting it. What you tolerated yesterday, maybe today you won't, and what wasn't a red line before, now it is. Life changes, and your constitution can grow with you. Imagine holding that page in your hand when someone tries to cross your limits. You don't need to argue. You just remember what you already decided for yourself. It's like showing an invisible shield. And believe me, when you live with that clarity, others sense it. They quickly learn you're not easy ground to step on. Writing your personal constitution is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect, because it's not a promise in the air, it's a solid, tangible commitment. And when your life has clear rules written by you, no one dares to govern it in your place. Number 7. Emotional independence without hardness or fear of what others think. One of the most common misconceptions is believing that being emotionally independent means becoming cold, closed off, or incapable of loving. Nothing could be further from the truth. Emotional independence isn't an ice wall. It's a solid ground you can walk on without fear of someone moving it at will. It's not about loving less, but about learning to love without losing yourself. Stoicism teaches something that was a real awakening for me. We are not responsible for what others think, feel, or do, only for our own choices. And when you put this into practice, you realize that much of our suffering comes from trying to control what isn't ours to control. How many times have you carried someone else's sadness as if it were your own? How many times have you thought, if I changed, he, she would finally be happy? That thought is a trap that robs you of peace. Here's an image for you. Imagine your emotions as a garden. You can water it, care for it, plant flowers. But if someone comes in and pulls out a plant, does that mean your entire garden is destroyed? Number. It means that person chose wrongly, but your ground is still yours. That's emotional independence, tending your garden without handing over the keys. I say this from experience. In one stage of my life, I confused love with absolute sacrifice. I thought being there for someone meant absorbing their problems, crying their tears, carrying their burdens, until I found myself empty, exhausted, resentful. That day, I realized that help given from depletion isn't love. It's abandoning yourself. And when I started returning responsibility to each person for their own load, something curious happened. My relationships didn't break, they healed. Those who truly loved me appreciated that I stood tall instead of dragging myself down. Let me ask you an uncomfortable question. What weight are you carrying today that isn't yours? Think about that, because emotional independence begins right there, when you decide that to accompany is not to carry, that to love is not to lose yourself, that to listen is not to absorb. One of the keys is to replace other people's expectations with simple data. When someone tells you, "If you loved me, you'd do this," instead of feeling it as a command, see it as information. This person has that expectation. Period. It's not an order, not a universal truth, just data about what they want. And you decide whether or not to accept it. That mental distance is what protects you. Stoicism calls this the internal locus of control, focusing on what you can actually manage: your reaction, your calm, your words. That's what belongs to you. Everything else is outside noise. And when you stop absorbing that noise, you discover something beautiful. You can love more freely because you no longer love from fear or obligation, but from choice. Emotional independence doesn't make you harder. It makes you gentler with yourself. It allows you to give without emptying yourself, to listen without poisoning yourself, to walk alongside someone without collapsing. And when you live from that place, people notice. They realize you're not easy prey for manipulation because your well-being is not for sale. And that simple fact, believe me, completely changes how others treat you. Number 8, money and security. Your financial boundaries must be crystal clear. There's an area where many women often feel more vulnerable than anywhere else: money. Not because they don't know how to manage it, many have spent decades stretching the budget to make it last, but because culturally we've been taught to feel guilty when we set rules around it. Money becomes the perfect excuse for manipulations disguised as affection. If you love me, you'd help me. It's just a small loan. Why keep it if I need it more? And little by little, what should be a resource for your peace turns into a chain others use to drag you along. Stoicism, though it doesn't speak of money in modern terms, gives us clear principles about the value of things. Seneca said that the poor person is not the one who has little, but the one who desires much. What does that mean today? That true wealth lies in the peace of knowing your security doesn't depend on other people's changing whims, but on your own firm decisions. I remember a woman I worked with years ago who lived in constant anxiety because her brothers asked her for money every month. She felt she couldn't say no, because they're family. The result, she lived strapped, never saved anything, while they kept spending recklessly. One day, exhausted, she decided to set a boundary. I don't lend money except what I'm willing to lose. She paired it with a simple system: 3 envelopes, one for fixed expenses, one for emergencies, and one for savings. Within a few months, her anxiety dropped, and most importantly, she realized no one had starved because of her refusal. The ones who truly cared about her stayed. The others drifted away, showing what they were really after. A financial boundary is also an emotional boundary, because every time you say yes with guilt, you pay with both money and peace. That's why it's essential to establish clear rules. Never lend what you can't afford to lose. Don't mix finances with people who don't share your values. And remember that your peace costs more than any financial favor. Picture your finances as a garden just beginning to bloom. Each uncontrolled loan is like plucking a sprout too early. It may seem small, but if you repeat it enough times, in the end, nothing is left. On the other hand, when you water carefully, when you protect that ground, over time it becomes a safe, green, thriving place. I want you to reflect on this. How many times have you put your financial peace at risk out of fear of upsetting someone? And how long did it take you to recover afterward? It's a tough reflection, but a necessary one. Because if you don't put a price on your peace, others will cheapen it. Protecting your money is not selfish, it's self-respect. It's ensuring you'll have what you need for yourself, for your projects, for your old age, without depending on anyone's will. And believe me, when a woman protects her financial security, she sends a powerful message. My life is not for sale. That message is so strong that even the most insistent eventually learn to respect it. Number 9. Posture, gaze, and a firm voice. The body speaks even when the mouth is silent. Many times, without realizing it, we transmit insecurity through small gestures, slouched shoulders, avoiding eye contact, a shaky or rushed voice. And the curious thing is, those details influence how others treat us more than we think. A woman may say no with words, but if it's paired with a hunched posture and a weak tone, the response loses strength. Firmness isn't explained, it's embodied. Stoicism is not only about thoughts, but also about presence. Epictetus reminded his students that a philosopher shouldn't just talk about virtue, but live it visibly. And that visibility begins with the body. It's not about walking like a stiff soldier or imitating anyone, but about inhabiting your space with dignity. Feet grounded, shoulders open, gaze held. Not defiant, but not evasive either. A steady voice, unhurried, not competing with noise, but not hiding from it. I saw this firsthand in a rather ordinary situation. I once had to resolve a bank issue. I was annoyed because I had been kept waiting too long, and my first reaction was to rush up to the counter, hunched over, almost apologizing as I explained. The clerk barely paid attention. Then I paused, took a breath, straightened my back, looked her in the eye, and spoke slowly, with a firm tone. The change was immediate. Her attitude shifted too. It wasn't magic, it was presence. Here's a little self-workshop you can try. Stand in front of a mirror and say out loud simple phrases. I can't. I don't agree. That doesn't work for me. Now watch yourself. How is your body? What does your gaze do? Does your voice rush, or does it hold steady? Adjust until each word feels like it's coming from the center of your chest, not just your throat. With consistent practice, when the real moment comes, your body will already remember how to stand firm. Body language is like an invisible suit you're always wearing. And the best part is, you get to choose which suit. One that shouts insecurity and opens the door to abuse, or one that radiates respect and shuts down manipulation. You don't need to be aggressive or raise your voice, because real authority isn't measured in decibels, but in the calm with which you occupy your place. Ask yourself, how is my body when I say what I think? Am I shrinking or am I standing tall? Do I avoid the other's eyes or do I hold their gaze? Those questions are mirrors that don't lie. Remember, your posture, your gaze, and your voice are your first boundaries. When you embody them with firmness, you send a clear message without needing explanations. Here stands a woman who respects herself, and therefore, no one dares to trample her. Number 10. Choose your circle wisely. There's an uncomfortable truth. Not everyone around you deserves to be called a friend or close family. Sometimes we maintain ties out of habit, fear of loneliness, or the belief that better the devil you know than the one you don't. Meanwhile, we carry relationships that drain our energy, criticize without building, and only show up to take, never to give. Choosing your circle with discernment is not selfish, it's emotional survival. Stoicism teaches that the quality of our life depends largely on the quality of our relationships. Seneca wrote about the importance of surrounding yourself with those who lift you up, not those who pull you down. That advice is still valid. Every person you let into your life shapes your character, your mood, your worldview. So, what are you allowing them to plant in your soil? Let me share a short parable I often use to illustrate this. In a distant village lived a wise woman who helped others find their tribe. When a woman came complaining of loneliness or mistreatment, the wise woman gave her 3 stones. Place the first at your door, only those who lift it with respect may enter. Place the second on your table, only those who value it may sit. And keep the third in your heart, only those who know how to care for it belong there. The woman who understood the meaning of those stones learned to choose, and her life changed. The moral is simple. It's not about having everyone. It's about choosing a few well. I lived this myself. There was a time when my circle was large, but most were there only when they needed something from me. When I began applying filters, do they respect me? Do they support me in silence? Do they celebrate my achievements without envy? My circle shrank by half. At first it scared me, but then I discovered something precious. The peace of being surrounded by a few but truly good ones. Here are 3 clear filters you can use to review your circle. First, respect. Does this person honor your boundaries, your time, and your silences? Second, reciprocity. Does the relationship flow both ways, or are you always the one giving? Third, shared joy. Does this person rejoice in your growth, or do they minimize it? If they fail these filters, I'm sorry. They don't deserve the access they have. I know the guilt that weighs. How can I distance myself if it's my sister, my child, my lifelong friend? But the truth is, blood ties don't give anyone the right to destroy your peace. You can love someone and still decide how much access they get. Love doesn't demand closeness, and respect doesn't either. Choose your circle with intention and celebrate it. Make a small inner ritual, like a vow. I prefer a few who are true, rather than many who are empty. That phrase can become the stone you keep in your heart. And believe me, when your circle is filled with people who uplift you, it shows in your mood, in your calm, in your strength. No one dares to trample on a woman whose circle is her chosen tribe. Number 11. Your time is not free, and you need to make that very clear. There's something many people forget, and that we ourselves often forget too. Time is the most valuable thing we have. Money can be regained, even relationships can be rebuilt. But the time you give away never returns. Yet we tend to hand it out as if it were worthless, saying yes to unnecessary meetings, listening to toxic monologues, solving problems that aren't ours. And of course, at the end of the day, we feel drained, without having done anything truly our own. Stoicism is very clear about this. Seneca wrote one of his most famous letters on the shortness of life, where he says it's not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it. I read that message at a moment when my schedule was complete chaos. I said yes to everything, and then complained about having no time for what really mattered. It was like looking in an uncomfortable mirror. From then on, I understood. It's not a lack of time, it's a lack of priorities. Here's a simple method. Block out sacred time. Choose 3 spaces in your day or week that are untouchable. It could be your morning walk, your reading time, your afternoon rest, or your peaceful dinner. Those blocks are yours. They're not negotiable. Anyone who tries to interrupt them runs into your invisible wall. What does that do? It gives you back the sense that your life has order, and that not just anyone can disrupt your rhythm. I experienced this recently with a friend who always called during my reading hour. At first, I answered out of habit, until I realized that when I hung up, I was upset with myself. So I decided to mark that block as untouchable. The next time he called at that hour, I didn't answer. Later, I calmly explained, "At this time I'm busy, we'll talk later." What happened? Nothing serious. He understood, and I reclaimed my space. You can also prepare short phrases, almost like scripts, to respond without guilt when someone tries to invade your time. For example, "I can't right now, but I'll let you know tomorrow." "I'm in the middle of something, let's talk later." Or the classic, "No thanks." These are brief, unadorned replies that send the message that your time is valuable. Picture your calendar as a piece of land. If you don't put up fences, anyone can walk in and trample it. But when you arrange it, when you mark boundaries, your life becomes like a well-tended garden. Each plant has its space, each flower gets the light it needs. And most importantly, you learn to enjoy it yourself. Ask yourself right now, who are you giving hours to that you'll never get back? What could you be doing with that time if you reclaimed it? The answer may be uncomfortable, but it can also open the door to liberation. Remember, your time is not free. It's your scarcest, most sacred resource. And when you learn to protect it, the world understands. No one dares take advantage of someone who knows every minute of their life is priceless. Number 12. Conflict without drama. When someone confronts us, we almost always believe there are only 2 options: explode or swallow it in silence. Both are traps. If you explode, you lose control and credibility. If you stay silent, resentment builds up until anger makes you sick. But there's a middle way, facing conflict with clarity and without drama. That's one of the most valuable lessons Stoicism has taught me. Firmness doesn't need shouting. The philosopher Epictetus said it's not things themselves that harm us, but the interpretation we make of them. The same applies to conflict. The problem isn't disagreement, but how we handle it. Here's a practical method I really like, the DESC model, adapted to the Stoic calm tone. D stands for describe the fact without judgment. Yesterday you raised your voice at me during the meeting. E stands for express how you feel. I felt disrespected. S stands for suggest a change. Next time I'd like us to talk in private. And C stands for clear consequences. If it happens again, I'll step away from the conversation. Direct, firm, but without drama. I remember a work experience where I had to apply this. I had a boss who was annoying and who hasn't. He constantly interrupted me in public. My natural first reaction was to either stay quiet or argue back angrily. But one day I decided to try the method. I waited until the meeting was over and spoke to him privately. I described what he did, explained how it made me feel, asked him to let me finish my thoughts before commenting, and warned that if it didn't change, I would stop presenting in his presence. It wasn't a comfortable conversation, but it was effective. From then on, he interrupted me much less. The Bible also gives us practical wisdom here. In Proverbs 15:1, we're reminded, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And it's true, a calm tone, even when firm, has more impact than any shout. Drama creates more drama. Calm cuts through it. I'm not saying it's easy. When you're upset, the natural urge is to react with the same intensity. But here's where Stoic practice comes in. Breathe, observe, and remember. You decide whether to feed the fire or put it out. If the other person wants to argue, you don't have to step into that ring. You can walk away, postpone, or answer differently. Respect is not begged for, it's demanded with clarity and composure. Think back to your last conflict. Did you face it with drama or with clarity? What would have happened if you had used short, firm, calm sentences? Just imagining it shows you there is another way to face it. Resolving conflict without drama doesn't mean avoiding discomfort. It means embracing it intelligently. And when you learn to do that, you send a powerful message. I am a woman who respects herself, and even without shouting or crying, my voice is heard. No one dares to underestimate you when your calm is stronger than the noise. Number 13, silence and intelligent distance. Silence has a bad reputation. Many believe that keeping quiet is weakness, that stepping back is losing. But the truth is, some silences scream louder than any word, and some distances protect better than any wall. The secret is using them wisely, not as punishment or revenge, but as a conscious strategy of protection. Stoicism teaches us not to react immediately, but to observe before acting. That pause sometimes takes the shape of silence, and silence cuts the manipulator's game short. There's a modern technique I find very useful, known as the grey rock method. It means becoming neutral, giving no fuel to conflict. The other person tries to hook you with reproaches, loaded questions, provocations, and you respond calmly, briefly, without emotion. Like a rock, there's nothing to grab onto, and when there's no reaction, manipulation suffocates on its own. I remember this happening in my own life. Someone kept sending me hurtful messages, hoping I would explode. And I did. I used to take the bait, replying with explanations, anger, and justifications. But one day I decided to try strategic silence. I didn't reply immediately. I gave myself 24 hours. When I finally responded, it was with a single short sentence, nothing more. The result? The other person lost interest in attacking me. It was like extinguishing a fire by taking away its oxygen. That's another powerful image. Fire needs oxygen to grow. So does conflict. If you stop feeding it with your responses, it dies out. Not always instantly, but inevitably. That's why distance isn't abandonment. It's removing the ground where the other person used to feed. I want you to try this in a real situation. Next time someone pressures you to respond immediately, stop. Give yourself 24 hours. You don't need to announce it. Just do it. You'll be surprised how your perspective changes with time. What seemed urgent stops feeling that way. What seemed like a personal attack you'll recognize as an empty tactic. And most importantly, the other person learns that with you, urgency and pressure don't work. Silence is also a message. It says, my peace is worth more than an argument. It says, I won't waste my energy on your terms. And distance says, I respect you as a person, but I won't let you invade my life. These are firm messages that, without shouting or tears, set clear boundaries. Ask yourself, how many battles have you fought just because you couldn't bear the silence? How much energy would you have saved if you had let absence speak for you? Silence and intelligent distance don't make you cold, they make you wise. Because it's not running away, it's choosing. And when you learn to choose when to speak and when to remain quiet, when to stay and when to step back, you build a respect that no one dares to challenge. Number 14. Purpose and a daily ritual of respect. There's something that gives enormous strength to any boundary you set: having a clear purpose. Because when you know where you're going, it's much easier to say no to what pulls you off track. The problem is that many times we live like ships without a compass, drifting with the currents of what others expect from us. And in that drifting, we end up giving in, justifying, accepting. But when your purpose is firmly rooted, it becomes a lighthouse that lights your path and reminds you every day who you are and what you will never negotiate. I discovered this years ago while reading Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. He wrote that those who have a why can endure almost any how. That phrase marked me like an invisible tattoo. I realized that pain, loneliness, challenges, all of it becomes more bearable when there's a purpose holding you up. And that purpose doesn't have to be grand or perfect. It just has to be yours. It could be living in peace, caring for your health, being present for your grandchildren, writing a book. Whatever it is, it must take root in your truth, not in someone else's expectations. But purpose alone isn't enough if you only remember it from time to time. You need to bring it into your daily life with a ritual. Here's a simple one, just 5 minutes every morning. As soon as you wake up, sit in silence, place your hand on your chest, and repeat 3 phrases that connect you with yourself. For example, my peace is not negotiable. My life has direction. I deserve respect. Then visualize your day and remind yourself of one red line you won't allow anyone to cross. That small act, repeated day after day, trains you more than any theory ever could. I do this every morning, sometimes in silence, sometimes writing it on paper. And the interesting thing is, when I face a difficult situation, those phrases come back to me almost automatically, like a reflex. It's like having an invisible army of reminders walking beside me at every step. To give it even more strength, you can commit to a 30-day challenge. For 1 month, repeat this ritual daily and keep track of how your way of setting boundaries changes. You may discover that before, you gave in easily, and now your no comes out firmer. That before you stayed silent with guilt, and now you choose silence with dignity. Ask yourself, what word, what image, what purpose can hold you steady when others try to shake you? Write it down, repeat it, make it yours. That will be your lighthouse in any storm. Purpose and a daily ritual of respect are not luxuries. They're an invisible armor. Because when you know who you are and remind yourself of it every day, no manipulation, no criticism, no pressure can pull you off center. And it's right there, in that place, that the powerful woman no one dares to trample is built. We've walked together through a deep journey filled with uncomfortable questions, stoic reflections, and practical tools to shield your life against manipulation and disrespect. We saw that it's not about being harder, but about being clearer. That true strength doesn't come from raising your voice, but from standing by your word with calm. And that every decision, every serene no, every strategic silence are bricks with which you build the house of your dignity. We talked about letting go of justifications, about the access rule, about staying calm before responding, about learning to say no without embellishments, about spotting manipulation early, about writing your personal constitution, about cultivating emotional independence, about protecting your finances, about embodying firmness in your body. about choosing your circle wisely, about guarding your time, about facing conflict without drama, about using silence and distance intelligently, and finally, about living with purpose and daily rituals of respect. 14 lessons that don't stay in theory. They are concrete steps you can start applying today so that no one ever tramples on your dignity again. I want to thank you deeply for staying until the end. Not everyone commits to their personal growth this way, and you have. That speaks of your courage and your true desire to live with self-love and peace. I'm Gabriel, and this space, the Stoic Garden, exists to accompany you on that path. Here we cultivate wisdom, serenity, and courage so you can live each day with more inner freedom. I invite you to write in the comments what country you're listening from. It's a gift to see how this community is made up of seekers of truth from all over the world. And I also want you to leave a phrase that seals today's lesson. The one I propose is, "My peace is not negotiable." Write it, make it yours, and share it so it stays etched in your mind and in the minds of those who read it. And before you go, think of a friend, a sister, or a loved one who might need these words. Share this video with them. You never know if someone right now is needing this spark of clarity to reclaim their strength. Thank you again for joining me in this intimate and necessary talk. Now you'll see 2 more videos on screen that I'm sure you'll find valuable. Pick one and keep nourishing your mind and heart with the wisdom that will help you live with calm, dignity, and self-respect.